The American economy entered an ordinary recession during the summer of 1929 as consumer spending dropped and unsold goods began to pile up, slowing production. At the same time, stock prices continued to rise and by the fall of that year had reached levels that could not be justified by anticipated future earnings. On October 24, 1929, the stock market bubble finally burst as investors began dumping shares en masse. A record of 12.9 million shares were traded that day, known as Black Thursday. 5 days later, on Black Tuesday, some 16 million shares were traded after another wave of panic. Millions of shares ended up worthless, and those investors who had bought stocks on margin, which means borrowed money, were wiped up completely. Over the next several years, consumer spending and investment dropped, causing step declines in industrial output and rising levels of unemployment as failing companies laid off workers. By 1933, some 13 to 15 million Americans were unemployed and nearly half of the country's bank had failed.
This administration privatized the National Bank. The proceeds of these sales and those of other government companies were invested in the necessary infrastructure to increase the country's productivity and encourage investments that generate new jobs with the North American Free Trade Agreement. The high deficit could reduce the flow of investment and generating jobs, while it was decided to encourage private investment rather than maintaining the state activity without proper control. The announcement of the devaluation came on a Wednesday, and during the rest of the week foreign investors fled from Mexico without the government due to prevent any action until the following Monday, when everything was too late.
The financial crisis in Russia. Russia hits 19 August 1998. It was exacerbated by the Asian financial crisis that began in July 1997, given the resulting decline in global commodity prices. Oil was also the resource that higher tax revenues Russian government generated. The steep decline in oil prices had severe consequences for Russia. However, the primary cause of the Russian financial crisis is the result of the lack of payment of taxes by the energy and manufacturing industries. The Samba effect was the result of this contamination, as the Brazilian economic outlook deteriorated sharply as the Russian crisis in 1998 intensified the financial turmoil in international markets. Also, the declaration of moratorium by the state of Minas Gerais, second industrial economic, regenerated fear of investors, so that stocks fell and the dollar became worth half in a few months, but then recovered in less time than other regional economies. The Japanese yen fell to 147 as my selling began, but Japan was the world's largest holder of currency reserves at the time, so it was easily defended and quickly bounced back.
The 2000 financial crisis is considered by many economists to have been the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. It threatened the collapse of large financial institutions, which was to prevent the bailout of banks by national governments, but stock market still dropped worldwide. The housing market also suffered, resulting in evictions, foreclosures, and prolonged unemployment. The activate phase of the crisis, which manifested as a liquidity crisis when BNP Paribas terminated withdrawals from three hedge funds, citing a complete evaporation of liquidity. Several Eurozone member states were unable to repay or refinance their government debt or to bail out over indebted banks under their national supervision without assistance of third parties like other Eurozone countries, the European Central Bank or the International Monetary Fund. Private debts arising from the property bubble were transferred to sovereign debt as a result of banking system bailouts and governments' responses to slowing economics post-bubble. The structure of the Eurozone as a currency union, without fiscal union, contributed to the crisis and limited the ability of European leaders to respond.
Now, last but not least, what can possibly match them? Well, our capitalist system has the crisis in itself.
There were connections with the international economy, albeit with greater magnitude in the European economy, also spread to Latin America, as it was an area of great exports, instability of commodity markets.
Created using Powtoon.